My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. Now, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage us all to be better consumers of cinema. And I want to take a minute here just to apologize to my subscribers for being so inconsistent lately. I've had multiple Sunday afternoons that created conflicts for the live streams. So what I think I'm going to do is change my streaming time to Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern and see if that works out any better. Originally, I was like, Sunday afternoons would be great. I don't have anything going on. It'll be great. It'll be fine. I can do it. And then a whole bunch of stuff came out for the last couple of weeks. So I think for moving forward, I'm going to try Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern to see if that works out. As a note, though, I will be taking off next Sunday, Sunday, November 21st, because I will be on vacation. So Sundays are a little complicated for me right now, but hopefully after Thanksgiving, I'll try to be a little more consistent with the live streams. So I'm going to try to get back on a regular schedule after that. So my apologies to the viewers. Well, this week I'm going to be reading through a review from the Star Tribune titled "Super Strength Needed to Stomach the Senses Assaulting Batman v Superman," written by Colin Covert, or Covert. I'd never figured out how to pronounce it, but I'm going to go Covert. Let's go Covert. So as you might recall, though, I previously thought that this review was lost to us forever after discussing the idea that I had discovered that Colin had been let go from his position at the Star Tribune due to an ethics breach. But one of my viewers that goes by the username, and excuse me if I don't pronounce it correctly, please forgive me, Zingyi Lee on Vero, found it through web.archive.org and sent me the link, which you can now click on for yourself in the video description if you'd like to follow along and read it. And if Colin Covert should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible, and I would ask that anyone watching live with me or posting in the comments later would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were written by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were both changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse. Before, though, I get into Colin's thoughts, I'm sure there are some viewers out there who might think, he's a film critic for a major news outlet, or he was, I guess. Who cares what you have to say, Rebecca? Which, I think is fair. I think it's fair to question that and to ask me that question. So if you're watching and had that question, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on me and what to provide what I think that I can offer to the table in regards to film analysis and film criticism. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at The Derby Kid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, so let's take a look at the review that I thought was gone forever, but now that we have the link and the actual review itself, let's get into Colin Covert's review from the Star Tribune before it was wiped from the internet due to an ethics breach from Colin. So we don't know technically, and honestly, we don't know if he plagiarized any of this, but for this exercise, I'm going to operate under the assumption that these are his thoughts and his words. So let's get to it. So the thing that I usually like to start looking at with these reviews is the headline. So the headline for this, the title of this review is Super Strength Needed to Stomach the Senses Assaulting Batman v Superman. And then underneath it is a little subheading that says it might be better to punch yourself in the face for 2.5 hours. And then it says Colin gave it a 1 out of 4 stars. So that's his rating for this film. So even though I disagree with the headline, I don't agree with any part of that. I don't think you need to summon up super strength to stomach Batman v Superman. I would not call it senses assaulting, and I don't think you should punch yourself in the face at any point, even if it's over a film you don't like. I think that's bad. You shouldn't do that. Don't punch yourself in the face, and especially don't punch yourself in the face for 2.5 hours. Even though I disagree with all of that, I do think the way that Colin worded this, I think is, somewhat clever. And I think it's, mostly well written. A lot of these titles that I've been looking at are kind of, kind of boring or, repetitive or cliche. But this one, he's trying something new. So I actually respect that. The subheading, however, makes me think that I shouldn't take this review seriously. Right out of the gate, talking about punching yourself in the face for 2.5 hours, it makes me think that there is no intention of this reviewer wanting to even try, even aim to take a thoughtful approach to reviewing this film. So the headline itself, understandable from his point of view, but the subheading makes me not want to take this review very seriously because it seems like a joke to him. I'm also curious as to why Colin gave Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice 1 out of 4 stars. So he did give it 1 stars, 1 star. He could have given it 0 stars, but he did give it 1 star. So I'm curious, what's the 1 star for? We'll see if he actually tells us or if we can manage to guess. That's what I'm hoping that we'll get out of this review. More than anything, I want to know why he gave it 1 star. Okay, so right from the opening, he says, quote, "They should have called it Batmeh v Super Meh," unquote. And Colin, with this sentence, is immediately making me regret that I said that his headline was clever, because this sentence is actually pretty cringy. It might look good on paper and might look clever on paper, but when you actually say it out loud, ugh, it's not great. And maybe you're not supposed to read these reviews out loud. That's just what I'm doing for this exercise and this experiment that I've been doing. But oh boy, that sentence is pretty cringy. Okay, so let's keep going. He writes, quote, "Running 153 minutes with a swollen budget of $250 million, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is pure overpriced, overproduced, and overlong pulp. It is an interesting idea of a film created by people who have no earthly idea how to do it. A quasi epic without a thimbleful of wit, style, or rooting interest in either of its leads." So I initially had written some notes about this paragraph that now I'm seeing more things in it that I want to talk about. So I first want to talk about the fact that it's an interesting idea of a film created by people who have no idea how to do it. That I'm curious about in terms of the way he writes that and why he says that. Why does he say that the people who made this, Zack Snyder is the director of this film, but I guess he's referring to also maybe Chris Terrio, the screenwriter. I don't know who he's talking about by created by people. Lots of people work on a film, so I'm curious who he is condemning here. But he says created by people who have no earthly idea how to do it. Why would he say that? Is the film not telling the story from the script? Is it not portraying the story that it's intending to tell? I think it captures the story really well. I think it portrays the characters in the way that they are meant to be told according to the story. So I think they actually did it expertly in terms of the direction, the acting, the score, the action sequences, the stunts, the CGI, all of it, I think is pretty well done. So I don't know why he's asserting that these people who made the film have no idea how to do it, even down to like the wardrobe and the makeup and all that kind of stuff. It's done really well. So I don't know why he says they don't have any idea how to do it. I think they definitely knew how to do it. And then it says a quasi epic with a thimbleful of wit, which I guess is going back to that old well of, oh, this film doesn't have any humor in it, there are no jokes. There's plenty of jokes. We've gone through this many times in terms of Jeremy Irons is Alfred and Perry Perry White. Let's go to Perry.
There's copy, all right.
I mean, to me, that's, I keep that clip around just because I love it so much. But there's so much more in terms of the wit of the film that's in it. So I think it has a little more than a thimbleful of wit. It also says a thimbleful of style. What do you mean by style? Do you mean the aesthetic of the director and the shots that were, the cinematography from Larry Fong? Is that talking about the style of the clothing? Is it talking about the style of the sets? What are you referring to here, Colin? Are you what kind of style are you talking about? Because I think Fong's cinematography is first rate, top notch. So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say the directing choices are without style. I mean, Zack Snyder, even one of the biggest criticisms for his films are that he's style over substance. So even though I disagree with that wholeheartedly, but at least even his naysayers say he has a style. And then it says, without a thimbleful of rooting interest in either of its leads. How? How does the film not root for either of its leads? It's telling a Batman and a Superman story in one film. I would say maybe it's more of a Superman story, but there's rooting interest. I care about all the characters in the film. That's such a strange thing to write, in my opinion. So those are the things that stuck out to me when I read this another time. So I'll go through my thoughts as I made the notes on them. So here, Colin mentions the runtime, 153 minutes, and critics. As we go through all of these reviews, they love to talk about the runtime. They love to talk about how long it is. What's really funny to me is that it was only 2.5 hours long, the theatrical version. The extended cut, the ultimate cut, is 3 hours long, which I can understand if somebody had problems with a 3 hour cut. But 2.5 hours, that's pretty common nowadays in modern cinema. So I don't know why that's such a they have such a big beef with that. Even some of the MCU movies have run that long. So I don't know what the big deal is with the runtime. They seem to mention that in all of these reviews. Colin also calls it overpriced, and I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. Is he referring to the box office ticket? I assume he didn't have to pay for this. I assume he was invited to a screening of this, but I would agree if he's talking about box office, I think box office tickets are a little overpriced sometimes. I assume he's more so talking about the film's budget, but that's a strange way to put that about it being overpriced. Maybe he's saying you pay for something that you don't get as much return on. I don't know what he's saying there. Overproduced. I understand what overproduced means, but how? How is it overproduced? He doesn't explain that. Overlong, which he makes reference to in the runtime. And it's really also, I guess, in hindsight, pretty fascinating to look at this when people are talking about how long it is. Well, it's reviews like this that I think reinforced Warner Brothers' decision to chop Justice League down to 2 hours. They had a 2 hour runtime mandate, and it's stuff like this. There were probably two reasons that they chopped it down to 2 hours. One, to make sure that it ran more in the theaters so they can make more money and sell more tickets. And then two, I think it was because of reviews like this that called it over long. It's so long. 2.5 hours. It's so long. Well, they the next attempt was 2 hours, and it was worse because of that. So I don't understand the obsession with the runtime. The runtime doesn't mean anything in terms of a film review. I don't understand that at all. It's like when I look back and think about some other films in the history of cinema, you talk about Titanic. That's 4 hours. When I was a teenager, and I'm probably aging myself, Titanic came out when I was a teenager. And I remember when it came out on VHS a long time ago. It was 2 VHS movies. It was so long. That was very, very rare. That was the only movie I ever owned that had 2 VHS tapes in it, because it was so long. And I don't condemn Titanic because of the runtime. I love Titanic. It's a great film. And nobody seemed to care that it was a long film. So I think that criticism is just so strange. I don't know if it's because I think one time we talked about in a previous live stream, I think Andy in the live chat mentioned it, that it may have been like in these reviews, they have a certain word count that they're trying to hit. And so if they add a little comment about the runtime, it gives them more word count to their review, gives them more words to add to that count. So I don't know. I just think it's a strange thing to mention. Also, I will say that Colin made an interesting choice of the word pulp here, according to his opinion on the film. And so I just wanted to take a look at the word pulp because it doesn't, sometimes you hear the word like pulp fiction. And sometimes I hear pulp being mentioned in terms of a genre of storytelling. And so I just wanted to take a second to look at the word pulp because it's very rare that I see pulp used with Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. So let's take a look at some definitions related to that word. So one of them is a soft, moist, shapeless mass of matter. Okay. Another one is a magazine or book printed on cheap paper, such as newsprint, and often dealing with sensational material. And there's another definition that means sensational or tabloid writing, often used attributively. So I guess to go through these, is Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice soft? Well, Colin told us in the headline that he thought the film assaulted his senses. So I don't think he's referring to that definition. Maybe the more appropriate use of the word is talking about something being produced cheaply. I don't know. Colin said it was overpriced and overproduced, so it wasn't cheap. Is he talking about it being sensational or tabloidish? I don't know. I don't know. I like the use of pulp as a description. I think it's a cool word. But in looking deeper into that word and what it actually means, I'm not so sure is applicable to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And Colin might be debunking his own claim here. So I think that's very interesting. And I'm going to take a second to hop in the chat and see what's going on in here to see if there are anybody has any comments. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Let's keep going. Dennis says Avengers Endgame was 3 hours. Nobody complained then. Now, to be fair to Colin here, Avengers Endgame came after Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and so that wasn't in the discussion back then in 2016. But it's true though. That's a 3-hour film. I haven't watched it, but I know it's a very long movie. So that you can't say. I mean, does that mean that Avengers Endgame is a bad movie because it's 3 hours? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, Dennis also says they already took out 30 minutes in the movie, so you can't say it's over long. Yeah, I mean, I would get it if they said the ultimate cut was long. I understand that it is long. So that's just funny, kind of looking back in hindsight that they thought, oh, 2.5 hours is long. Well, you could have had a 3-hour movie. Let's see. David also mentions Gone with the Wind was also 2 VHS tapes, and says, though I never got to watch my mother's copy, it grew that weird mold on the plastic tape. Yeah. Oh man, VHS. I wouldn't want to go back to VHS, but I have a nostalgia for it. Gone with the Wind, also a very long film. And Gone with the Wind was kind of the first blockbuster in cinema history. It was one of the first huge big hits and like a big production. So they didn't seem to care back in, I believe that came out in 1939. Someone fact check me on that. I think 1939 was like a big year for movies. I want to say that was around the same time as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So it was a big time for film history there. But yeah, Gone with the Wind. I mean, there's so many films that you could look at and say, even if they're not 4 hours, they might be a little over 2.5 hours, so they might be close to 2.5 hours. A lot of films these days, back in the 30s and 40s, you would get shorter films. I used to work and do things for TCM, Turner Classic Movies. I used to watch DVDs and Blu-rays of some of their commercial things that people could buy, their consumer related discs that you could buy off the website, and some of their collections. And so I'd watch the films and make sure the discs worked properly. That was part of my job. It was called QC, quality control. So I'd make sure like the discs weren't broken and all the controls worked and the video and the audio was okay. And so I would see a lot of classic films that were like an hour long. And so sometimes they weren't great because sometimes it didn't make sense because they didn't have a lot of time to explain everything. But back in the 30s and 40s, they would have shorter films. But nowadays, I mean, 2.5 hours, in my opinion, is kind of the norm now. So it's funny to me that would be part of the criticism of the film here. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, David says, I guess with Gone with the Wind, late 1939 premiere, broad release 1940. Yeah, it sort of sticks out to me in terms of the late 1930s. What a great year for film. What a great time for film. Okay, well, let's hop back into the review and see what else Colin has to say. Okay, so Colin says, quote, "The respected Christopher Nolan is one of the producers of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, but this film is to his Dark Knight trilogy what a Black Velvet Elvis is to the Mona Lisa. This dour, dead on arrival film throws the feel, my southern accent, the feel-good glory days of American comic books on a funeral pyre," unquote. I understand the temptation to compare BVS to the Dark Knight trilogy because the character of Batman is in both film adaptations, but these are two different stories, two different interpretations of the Batman character, and they're directed by two different directors who have different perspectives on the character, on the world, on the mythology. So, of course, they're going to be different. I don't understand. I understand the temptation to compare them, but I also don't understand why they need to be compared in the first place because they're just different takes on the Batman character. Of course, they're going to be different. And I can understand why Colin would use the word dour to describe BVS. I mean, I don't personally see it as a way to describe the film because the story is sad in a lot of ways. It's grim in a lot of ways. It's tough, it's like it's tough to take, sometimes with the way uh the story plays out and the fighting and the disagreeing and a lot all of that is serious. It's I would probably describe BBS more as a serious story. It's taking the characters in the world seriously. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily dour. That's not how I would describe it. But so I understand why Colin does see it that way. But what I don't understand from his description is why it's dead on arrival. He doesn't really go into that unless he's talking about the next thing that he mentions about BBS throwing the feel good glory days of American comic books on a funeral pile. Maybe he's saying it's dead on arrival because he thinks it does that. But I don't understand how it's throwing the feel good glory days of American comic books on a funeral pile when the film itself is paying homage to several comic book stories like the death of Superman, The Dark Knight Returns, Superman Peace on Earth, Injustice. It's putting the comic books on the big screen. So how is it throwing comic books in a funeral pyre when it's honoring the comics? That I don't agree with at all. So that's really interesting. All right, so Colin goes on to say, quote, "It is largely a follow-up to director Zack Snyder's 2013 smash fest, Man of Steel, and you will need a will of steel and a strong stomach to sit through it." He's really having to really stomach these films, Man of Steel and BVS. I don't know what kinds of films Colin watches, but maybe they're a lot of saccharine films, and this is like tough to watch a serious film. Does he not watch a lot of serious films? I'm curious. Like, what kind of films does Colin normally watch? He says, quote, "The earlier film was a savage Superman demolition derby that left many fans pained by its illogical and repulsively grim body count. This rehash and reheat installment aims to clear up those unresolved issues with an even higher tally of fatalities," unquote. Okay, so Colin may not have known this at the time, but I can't I can't imagine that BVS has a higher tally of fatalities than Man of Steel. I think you can understand that, and I think you can take that away from watching BVS because you can see who dies in the film. You know, you can see if people die. You can see what's happening. People die in the Capitol bombing. People die in Africa. Superman dies. But that's not a higher fatality count than Man of Steel. And maybe Colin didn't know this. Maybe he thought that there were only, I don't know, 50 people who died in Man of Steel. I don't know how many people he thought died in Man of Steel. But BBS is clearly not higher than that. I know this is a nitpick, but I think it's interesting because he makes it seem like a whole lot of people get killed in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. There are people who die. There are people who die. But it's not as bad as Man of Steel. So it's interesting because during a live event about Man of Steel hosted by Kevin Smith, Zack Snyder actually addressed the body count in Man of Steel. He actually puts a guess, he puts an estimate, a number on how many people he think died in Man of Steel. And this is what he said. This is what Zack Snyder said. He said, quote, probably 5,000 people or something like that. I mean, I imagine that's a horrible thing to say. You don't want to put numbers on it, but you have to imagine that there were people in these buildings, and we did. And I've got to say that for me, that was part of it. We were like, no, there's real consequences. We're used to seeing all these superhero movies and all this destruction. And not to compare, but if you look at Avengers, they trash New York City, and no one even mentions the fact that there's thousands of people dying in there. And I feel for me, that's why it's heavy at the end of it. There's like sadness to the end of the movie. It's not just fun to crash around in a city. There's a human price. And I think that's the thing that weighs on Superman, unquote. So from Zack Snyder's mouth, he thinks 5,000 people died in Man of Steel. So I don't know. I'll put it to anybody watching this. Do you think more than 5,000 people died in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice? I don't think so. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so to continue on with Colin's review, he writes, quote, it also introduces Batman as his adversary and name checks several other super folks scheduled to quickly have their own films. All of it is offered up with feverish seriousness. If you wonder what's meant by the phrase deadly dull, this is it. My question here is, what does Colin think is deadly dull? Is he saying that the Justice League teasers are deadly dull? Does he think that Batman and Batman's story or Batman's arc was deadly dull? I'm not really sure what he's talking about here. That's not written all that well because I'm a little confused by his thoughts. To keep going, he writes, quote, hunky, shallow Henry Cavill emerges as the Taylor Kitsch of the moment. He returns as the red-caped alien roaming across Metropolis and Gotham City, here set closer side by side than Minneapolis and St. Paul, in mighty leaps and bounds. He's the sort of good guy who liquefies bad guys with laser beams from his eyes, unquote. So, okay, if you didn't know, in case you didn't know, like I didn't know, because I didn't know this, what the word roaming meant, here is the definition. Well, there's a couple of, I guess, definitions that I found. One is a collision followed by a rebound. And then another one is a shot in billiards in which the cue ball successfully strikes two other balls. So why does it seem like roaming is used as a negative here? Wouldn't it make sense that Superman would be described like this in action sequences where he's kind of, he's a collision. He has a lot of strength and force behind him when he flies. Maybe he's, doing multiple things, trying to do multiple things at the same time. Maybe he is colliding with something and rebounding and flying out. That I don't see why that's a negative, especially in his big fight against Batman and even a lot of the other action sequences. Why does that seem like a negative to me? I don't know. I think that's actually kind of a cool way to describe Superman, actually. And Colin also describes Superman here using both the Clark Kent that we've been following, the good guy, the guy that we know who is in love with Lois and who's now got a job at the Daily Planet in BVS. He's describing that Superman and also mixing him in with the Nightmare Superman, who is the same guy in it, like another timeline or another set of sequences of events. Same guy, but different iteration of the character. Because he says, he writes, liquefies bad guys with laser beams from his eyes. So I'm assuming that he's referring to the Nightmare sequence when that Superman, the Nightmare Superman, is approaching Batman, who's hung up, and he's killing the guys next to Batman with his heat vision. And I don't think that's fair. Colin here doesn't distinguish between the two. Those are two very different interpretations of the same character because of two different circumstances. Maybe if we had seen the story continue on, we would have seen the Clark Kent that we know and love become that Nightmare Superman because of the anti-life equation. But I don't think it's fair to write that in the same sentence, in the same thought, and make it appear as the good guy Superman is the one who is doing this, because that is misleading to the reader. So I don't think that is fair to write at all. So I'm gonna hop in here in the chat just real quick and just see if anybody's talking about some stuff. So Dennis is talking about Colin's use of the feel good glory days, and Dennis thinks it's referring to the Silver Age. And the the poor writing and inconsistent storytelling in the Silver Age. I guess so. It could be talking about the Silver Age and kind of what most people think of with those characters, because not a lot of people know about the Golden Age stuff, but they might know about the Silver Age, and a lot of the Silver Age stuff was actually put to screen with like the Donnerverse. I think the Donnerverse is very Silver Age like. The Helen Slater Supergirl movie is very much kind of planted in that Silver Age time period. Even with the Batman 66, I think that's very Silver Age-y. So I think sometimes people think of the nostalgia of their childhood and what they think of when they first learned about these characters. It was probably Silver Agey. And so I think it's very interesting to me that a lot of these reviewers want to reference the comics, but they don't want to acknowledge that the comics have changed over time. And BBS is actually more of a reflection of the Bronze and the modern age of comics. And so when they say it's not like the comics, well, that's not really accurate. They are like the comics. They're just from a different era of comics than what you think they are. So I think that's it's unfair to say that. Let's see. Yeah, David mentions big shout out to the 602 Club podcast. They did Man of Steel and Batman v Superman episodes and redid these in their Snyder Cut series and addressed Avengers damage in their Assembling Avengers series. I believe that's my friend Matt Rushing. Is that the 602 Club? Somebody confirm that for me. If it is Matt, Matt's a great podcaster, and you should definitely listen to his shows because he is a great. I also thought it was strange with specifically with Man of Steel, because I remember seeing Avenger, like the first Avengers movie, and the Hulk breaks through an office building and runs through the office, and there are people in the office, and nobody ever talks about that. That's maybe a little more dangerous because the Hulk is big and he smashes things. And in the comics, actually, I remember reading an Ultimate Avengers book, and I want to say that the Hulk in that like killed a whole bunch of people. So so the Hulk has the ability to do that and the capacity to do that. And the fact that nobody talks about that is strange to me, that they would skip over that when they discuss the destruction in these films. Let's see. And Dennis says, Donner took more from the Silver Age and then the ongoing Bronze Age, although with less camp than the actual Silver Age. I don't know, like in is it Superman 4? Yeah, it's Superman 4 when so in Superman 4, Clark and Superman, they're treated as two different identities. They have a double date with Lois and Hemingway, Mariel Hemingway. I don't think it's Margot. I think it's the other one. So there's like a double date with Superman and Clark, and they both show up. That is Silver Age to a T. That is, if anything is Silver Age, it is that. So when I think of the Donniverse, I think of the Silver Age. And David confirms, yes, it is Matthew Rushing. Yeah, Matt is such a great podcaster, and he's such a great person to talk to about film and to listen to talk about film. So I do highly recommend his stuff. And then David also says, in fact, it's his more Snyder critical co-host who brought it up in the Snyder Cuts Man of Steel episode, and definitely went to town on the Avengers episode. Interesting. So definitely go check those episodes out from the 602 Club and hear what they have to say. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going into the review from Colin, who writes, quote, Ben Affleck steps into the midnight black uniform of Batman, his chin resembling a cinder block beneath the mask. The actor delivers a concrete performance as Bruce Wayne, a vigilante billionaire so battle-weary that he retains a perpetual 3-day stubble, unquote. It's funny that Colin wants to bring up the comics to defend his position on why he doesn't think BVS is a good film. But then he kind of glosses over the fact that in a lot of comic book interpretations, Batman is shown with stubble while he's in the cowl. Like, that's a thing. Anyway, so he mentions that, let's see, he says the actor delivers a concrete performance as Bruce Wayne. So I'm curious about that. Does he mean that Ben's performance was solid like concrete? I'm curious if that's what he means. It's kind of hard to tell because he really tears into Ben Affleck, but then he says he has a concrete performance. So I'm not really sure if he liked Ben Affleck's performance or if he didn't. And if he did like Ben Affleck's performance as Bruce Wayne, is this the reason for his 1 star? I'm just curious. I have no idea. Colin also says, quote, each despises the other, talking about Superman and Batman. He's gone through Superman's character and he's gone through Batman's character. And then he says, each despises the other as a threat to humanity. And Snyder, who has a knack for violence, expends vast amounts of computer-generated chaos and slow-motion acrobatics to drive home the point, unquote. I think we maybe went through some of this before, but there aren't vast amounts of slow motion in BVS. There's just not. There's a couple of shots, and that's it. It's not like what people think of Zack Snyder films as being, like with the speed ramping. There's more speed ramping in other Snyder films, but not in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. There's really not a lot of it. So I don't know why he says vast amounts. Now, there might be vast amounts of chaos. I'll give Colin that. There's definitely a lot of chaos in Batman v Superman, but not slow motion. But even if there was, does that make it bad? Does that make it objectively bad? I don't know. You'd have to explain it to me. I would take that as a criticism if you could explain why having slow motion in the film was a bad choice. I don't think it inherently makes it bad. So that's just my thought on that. He goes on to say, quote, the opening of the film returns us to Superman's city-shattering battle in the previous film. He really did not like Man of Steel, explicitly resonating to the 9/11 terror attacks on Manhattan. It rushes, and just as a side note, I recently rewatched the Green Lantern movie with Ryan Reynolds, and that movie is way more 9/11 heavy in the imagery than I think Man of Steel was. Like, it really, I mean, with the parallax stuff, with like the smoke and the smog of parallax coming through the city, boy, you want to criticize 9/11 terror attack images? Woo! I mean, the Green Lantern movie is full of them. I would say it's thicker in the Green Lantern movie than it is in Man of Steel, but people, these critics really love to rip into the 9/11 imagery of Man of Steel. But also, Does that make it bad? Does that make the film bad? I don't think it inherently makes it bad. It just means that it's trying to reference something that's a real world event that people can relate to, and is also something that would actually happen in an event such as that. In an event, if Parallax did attack Coast City, it would probably look like that. If Zod and his people had the Black Zero event, it would probably look like that. These are just things that happen. So I don't know. That's just a side note, a side tangent. So it bothers me when they reference 9/11 here in terms of the imagery. They make it appear as though that's bad, even though it's that doesn't make it bad. It just means that's how they approached that sequence of events. Anyway, side note. Colin also says, quote, it rushes to horror film scenes of Batman torturing criminals and sending them to prisons where their branding iron bat tattoos are a death sentence among other evildoers. This is explained in the film. There's a reason for this, but he acts like Batman's just going around branding people and trying to kill people. There's a whole storyline that involves the branding, and there's a turn of events at the very end where Batman does not brand Lex Luthor, so it shows a change of character, and that's not mentioned here. I guess not to spoil the ending. Colin also says, quote, the stars launch overheated sadomasochistic duels again and again before jointly facing a computer-generated alien warrior that literally disembowels his victims. Well, actually, I think it says that literally disembowel his victims. I think it should be disembowels. I think he actually typed that incorrectly. It should have an S there. Disembowel his victims, just in case you skipped anatomy class, unquote. So is this computer-generated alien warrior referring to Doomsday? That's all I can think of. And if so, who does he disembowel? Is this referring to Doomsday killing Superman, stabbing Superman in the chest? And if so, why is this a bad thing? Especially in my opinion, when it's not done in an overly gross way. It could have been like when you say disembowel, I think of like those slasher films that are really gross and really like disgusting. But the way it's presented in BVS is not that at all. It's stabbing Superman in a way that you see its impact, and you see the death, and you see how dramatic it is, but it's not done in a way to really emphasize the gross nature of what has happened. So I think this is another instance of being unfair about what has happened in the film, and I think Colin is being very disingenuous in how he describes the film. Let's see. He goes on to say, quote, Gal Gadot joins the brawl as Wonder Woman with a smirky, I'm just warming up expression. Amy Adams' return as Lois Lane gives the film a rare nod to humanity. Jeremy Irons acts ever so adroitly. I love that word, adroitly, as Batman's butler Alfred, and Jesse Eisenberg is resourcefully artificial playing tech. I think it means to say, and Jesse Eisenberg is a resourcefully artificial playing tech wizard Lex Luthor. I don't know. That's a really weirdly worded sentence. As a budding lunatic. It's not all terrible, unquote. That's high praise from Colin here. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. It's not all terrible. Okay, let's break this down. So Colin seems to like the performances from Gal, Amy, Jeremy, and Jesse. So that's a good thing. I appreciate that he's able to get over his dislike of the film clearly by saying that there are some good things in the film. The performances from the actors are really good. I think he might have also, and it's kind of unclear if he liked Ben Affleck's performance or not, but if that's the case, then that's another one in there. So maybe his 1 star out of 4 here is the performances. Maybe he really liked the acting performances in this film. He mentions, a quote, a rare nod to humanity, unquote. I would agree that Lois Lane does provide that for the film, but there's actually also an entire thematic element to this film that pits Bruce Wayne as the man versus Superman as God. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice is more about, humanity than Colin is giving it credit for. There's Lois Lane bringing the humanity. There's Bruce Wayne bringing humanity. In some ways, Lex Luthor is bringing humanity. He's also a man going up against God in a different way than Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor make different choices, and that's what sets them apart. Also, if you think about if you seek his monument, look around you. That's about humanity trying to inspire each other. Without Superman, they look to themselves as the heroes and look to themselves as the Superman in each other's lives. So, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has lots of humanity in there. So I don't know why he says a rare nod. I think Lois as a nod to humanity would just be one aspect of humanity in there. Although I think Lois is the biggest aspect of humanity in the film because Superman calls her his world. So Lois, in a lot of ways, she's the personification of Superman's attachment to Earth. She is his world. She is the world. So I think he kind of gets there with Lois in this review, but I don't think he goes far enough in terms of the humanity aspect of the film. Okay, and so to wrap up Colin's thoughts in this review, he ends it with quote, oh, well, I guess let's go back to that previous paragraph where he says, "It's not all terrible." Which is funny to me because what happened to the assertion from the beginning of this review? He wrote, "It might be better to punch yourself in the face for 2.5 hours." But then by the end of it, he says, "It's not all terrible." So what is it? Is it so terrible that you need to punch yourself in the face for 2.5 hours? Or is it actually kind of good sometimes? I don't know. I'm getting conflicting thoughts here from Colin. I don't know what he wants to say in this review. Okay, so he ends the review saying, quote, "The real villains here seem to be director Snyder, who believes that no Duke Out is worth filming unless it runs 50 rounds, and the MPAA ratings board recommending this assaultive film to children with a PG-13. Okay, so Colin, why is Zack Snyder a villain? Why? He mentions the 50 round fights. Why? Why is that a bad thing? I don't. This is the thing about these reviews is they'll say these things, they'll write these things down, but then I don't understand why they're bad. I guess it's just because they don't like it. I guess Colin just didn't like the long fight sequences, so therefore it's bad. But why is it bad? Why is it bad that Zack Snyder made a long fight sequence? I mean, the Batman Superman fight is long. It's a long fight sequence. But if he made a short fight sequence, if he said Batman and Superman are going to fight in this film, and then he made a short fight sequence between the two of them, people would be mad. They would be so livid. I would have been livid. But he actually promised a Batman v Superman fight, and then he made it worth your while. If anything, this review should end with Zack Snyder paid off everyone's need to see Batman and Superman fight in a fight sequence that's worth the wait. That's what he should have written. But here he wanted to paint Zack Snyder as a villain in this film for making a long fight sequence. Why that's a bad thing, I'll never know, and I may never get to ask Colin about that. I think for this review, I just wanted more. I wanted more reason. A lot of these reviews, I feel like do this. Like they'll put something out there, and I want more. I want more explanation. Why do you think this? Why do you feel this way? But because they end, I never get a chance to know. So the good thing is I at least got to read this review. I thought it was gone from the internet, the interwebs forever. But now we've actually gotten to go through here and see exactly what he thought. So let's get back into the chat here and see what people said. Let's see. Dennis actually says never watched the Green Lantern movie. You know what? It's not the greatest movie I've ever seen in my whole life, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. I think it's actually a very it's it's a take on the material that I think is trying to be faithful to Green Lantern and the Green Lantern mythology. I think it could have gone through a couple of additional drafts. I think somebody could have gone through it with a red pen and made it better. But I think in terms of the Green Lantern mythology, I think it tries to be pretty faithful. And it's interesting. I just recently, because I watched it for a Supergirl Radio Patreon review that we did over at Supergirl Radio, and I went to go look up some things about some of the history of the film, and guess what? WB messed with that film too. So Warner Brothers interfering with DC films goes back quite a long way. So it goes back to that film. So if it's not as good as people wanted it to be, maybe that's WB's problem. Maybe that's their fault. So I think there's some good stuff in that movie. So I would recommend it just to see what they did with it. Like I said, I think it could have been better. I think they could have made the writing and the storytelling a little better. And I think if WB hadn't interfered and messed with it, I think some of the things that they were going to do in it would have made it better. But I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. Let's see. Let me keep going in here. Yeah, Dennis also says, I don't get why they pretend that Doomsday is a spoiler and when he was literally in the marketing. Yeah. By I think it was trailer 2, they showed Doomsday. So yeah, I don't know. I guess sometimes they just feel the need to overly protect things, which I respect. I respect somebody like trying to protect the experience for the audience. But when they do so and I don't really understand what they're talking about, that's a problem. David says Superman was disemboweled the same way Qui-Gon was disemboweled by Darth Maul, as in not at all. Hello, sci-fi cauterizing. Yeah. I mean, the people get stabbed like in the stomach with the internal organs and all that all the time. That doesn't bother me as much as it does like how they depict it. If they depict it and it's just like gross and nasty, that's one thing. But if it's done in such a almost a reverent way with Superman and his death sequence, I think a lot of that is so it's just so reverent. I love to use that word when describing Superman's death scene because I just think everything about it is just caring about the character, making you want to feel things about, like I feel things about the character in that scene, and I feel like those characters going through something that Lois and Bruce and well, I guess Batman and Wonder Woman at that point are going through something, having seen Superman die, and so that's why it doesn't like I wouldn't I wouldn't describe it as disemboweled. I would just say stabbing. I think that's to me disembowel makes me think of like a slasher film. So I think that's a strange way to describe it personally. Let's see. Dennis makes a good point saying the Snyderverse is more pro-human than the Donnerverse, as we get lots of imagery of human bravery and goodness in Man of Steel, while in the Donnerverse is mostly the Jor-El speech. Yeah, when he's talking about I forget what that speech is, but they played it in the Superman Returns. They're great people, Kal-El. They wish to be, that whole speech. Yeah, I would agree with that. In Man of Steel, one of the best scenes in the film is when Jenny is really scared that she's going to die, and Perry reaches out his hand to hold her hand and comfort her when they think they're going to die, and they reach out, and Perry comforts her. That's such a good scene. Such a good scene. And in conjunction with that, Perry and Steve Lombard try to rescue her. Like they're using their physical strength to do it because Superman's not going to come around and remove that heavy stuff. They got to try to do it for themselves. So I agree. Let's see. So yeah, anyway, I guess that's going to kind of end my thoughts on this review here. I am glad that I was able to get this. So thank you to let me go back and make sure I say this correctly. Thank you to Zing Yi Lee, and maybe I totally butchered that, and I apologize if I did. But thank you to that user who messaged or commented on Vero and let me know that it was found on the web archive. So I was actually able to go through, and we did that together. We actually went through and read this review, even though the reviewer was actually let go from the Star Tribune for an ethics breach. So I'm not sure if this was one of the reviews that added to that ethics breach, but I guess we'll never know. Maybe somebody will be able to figure that out. But for right now, I don't know if this review was part of that. But we actually got to read it, which I think is good to document that for this series. So I think that's going to do it for this week's live stream. And just as a reminder, moving forward, I think I'm going to do these at 9 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. I think that's maybe going to be a better day, better time for me. 4 p.m. Eastern was great for a little while, and then I had a whole bunch of conflicts. And so I think from here on out, I'm going to try to do 9 p.m. Eastern on Sundays and see if that's a better time for me. So thank you all for popping in. I didn't get to promote this live stream at all before I did it. So thank you guys for popping in and sharing your thoughts with me. And if you did miss this live, if you weren't able to join in the live stream, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. If you have any questions about when I will be live, and if I do have to reschedule, just check on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/duckmilkprod. I'll always schedule them in advance so you'll know when I'll be streaming next. So definitely check that. And if you have a BVS review that you'd like to share that you think is good, we've been reading reviews that maybe aren't so good. But if you have a BVS review that you want to share because you think it's well written or you think it has some good insights to share with others, comment below and I'll share them in future videos and make sure that everybody sees them. So definitely, we want to promote good, well-written reviews and analysis. So if you have any you want to share, let me know. Well, I guess that's it from me, but I'm going to toss it over to voiceover Rebecca, and she's going to wrap up the live stream. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at @TheDerbyKid and on Vero at DerbyKid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTVpodcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.